The Artist's Toolkit, a training program for the artistic process, problems, background, and exercises.
Hi and welcome. This is the Artist's Toolkit, the training program that helps you develop your own personal artistic strategies by and with Kaethe Wenzel. And today is all about gaps. So today we talk about 3 types of gap. The first gap is the gap between your imagination and reality. I'm sure you've run into that gap many, many times, like everybody else, the gap between idea and reality. The second gap is the gap between felt perception and visual perception, because there is a gap between actually what you feel when you see something and just seeing something. And the third gap is the gap between what you feel while you work and what others feel when they look at your work. Because we have very often assumed that this is the same, but unfortunately it's not. But the first gap between idea and reality. You've all run into it. I mean, you all know this feeling. You have an idea, you do something, you're unhappy with it, and you throw it in the garbage. Please don't. One of the best tips of my art teacher at university, who Tesma, was keep everything for 3 years. If you can find space for it somewhere, please keep everything for 3 years before you decide to throw it out. Why? Because when you work, you try to make an idea that you probably see in your mind, you try to make that a reality. Unless you do an open experiment, on which I would congratulate you with an open outcome. But very often we have this idea what things should look like, and we work, and they don't look like what we wanted. Because it's very hard to bring an idea into the material world and to make it do what you want. Because it's a long, long road from your imagination into material reality. And ideas are not so tangible. I mean, very often ideas are some kind of transparent, shine-through thing that's also a bit of kind of floppy and not so easy to grasp. Or maybe, you have a precise feeling about an idea, but it's not necessarily visual. Also, even if it is very visual, the material will put in its word. It's very easy, and you can very quickly build entire buildings in your mind. But when you try to bring it out there is a lot of other factors who influence what's happening. For example, the material. We talked about it. Material. How well do you know your material? How well does your material fit your project? How well does your material fit you? And can you afford your material? Do you have access to the right tools to work it? Do you have enough time? Are you strong enough? Do you have the money? Do you have enough help? And so on and so on. And as I said, the material very often has its own opinion, and it also has its own language. So one point is you need time. And all of us normally plan with too little time. You should always plan with a maximum and then add 30%. So my students, for example, very often they plan as if the way between their idea or their design and a finished project, as if that was a very, very short road, because that's what it feels like, right? It feels like, okay, just round the corner, get some cigarettes and done. But of course, normally it's a long, long road without maps, without GPS, and it's okay, But the point is, what happens very often is you make something and in the end it looks completely different from what you wanted or what you expected. You're disappointed and you throw it out. No, stop. Because this is simply the gap between your idea and reality, and it really doesn't have to say anything about the quality of your work. This is not a moment when you can justly judge what you've made. Because you're in love with the idea in your imagination, with an image in your imagination. And your product, whatever you've done, your experiment, it may actually be better than what you're seeing in your mind, but you're not in any state to realize it. For example, you wanted something that was very, very detailed, but somehow you haven't been able to come up with anything that fits your imagination. You come up with something that is really simple. And of course, simplicity can be full of power and energy. And a lot of colleagues spend their lives trying to more and more simplify the forms they work with and to become always stronger and clearer. But you're in no fit state to see it. And you need distance. You need distance to value what is there. It's just like in human relationships. What you need is step back, reevaluate, restart. And actually, that is one of your most important tools when working as an artist. An important tool is take a step back, take a break, wait a little, give it time, and reevaluate. Because when you try to give an idea a body, that's what we're often trying, give an idea a material body, it turns out different from what you wanted or what you expected.
The Artist's Toolkit.
And that takes us to gap number 2. Important gap number 2 is between inner and outer perception. Because very often what we feel, our inner perception is different from what our physical eyes see. Because very often our inner perception is different from what we see on the outside. For example, I'm sure you all know these super strange moments when you look into the mirror and you think, oh, that's supposed to be me? I mean, that's what I look like. I feel completely different on the inside. I think I feel as if I should be looking different. Weird, right? And I'm sure you've all had that, this look into the mirror. And a lot of people have written about it, philosophers, zoologists. It's part of the history of development, of the history of consciousness. Actually, the ability to recognize your reflection in the mirror is kind of defined as a marker of consciousness, because not all animals do it. Not all animals identify themselves in a reflection. But that's not the point. Our point is that your inner perception is different from the outer perception. And that's one more thing you have to tackle in your work. And that's also a problem when you with realist work or hyper-realist work, or trying to do hyper-realist work. For example, a thesis very often, somebody wants to do something with hands. And because hands are so difficult to do or to make or to render in whatever way, people, or my students, like to work with casts. They cast their hands in plaster, for example, and use a plaster cast. But the problem is, when we look at a hand, we never only see just the shape of a hand. We see what we know about a hand, and it shapes our perception. And that is why a cast is hardly ever, or I'd say never, up to any kind of depiction or different rendering of a hand that you can do. For example, when you cast a hand in a light material, it often looks strangely swollen and too large. When you do it in heavy material, it often looks shrunken and small. The point is, and actually biologists have proven this, the point is, when we attach importance to things, we tend to see them differently. And I think this has mostly to do with the fact that we simply do not perceive just with our eyes, but we tend to think we do. I'm sure you all know this feeling of frustration that we sometimes have when we talk to people we love online. And somehow they're close and we talk to them and we see them, but when the talk is over, there is this kind of frustrating feeling. And I think this has to do with missing everything else, with not being able to touch them, to smell them, to feel the warmth of their bodies, and a million other things that we cannot perceive with just a video image on a computer screen. Even if it's moving, even if it's talking, it's just not enough. There's too much missing. So what I'm saying is, we always perceive more than just the shape. And what we know also shapes our perception of a thing. Which is why every drawing teacher normally tells you to make hands and faces larger than they actually are. I mean, you know, if you have very traditional drawing classes, for example, you will learn to measure things. I'd never do that, but people sometimes do it. And then I hope if you have a traditional teacher who tells you to measure stuff, who tells you to measure stuff, they should also tell you that you need to make the hands and the face larger than what you measure, simply because they are such important regions of the body and they are so important for us. They have such a high significance. For example, the face is where we read whether somebody is friendly or not, whether they're going to attack us or trying to eat us. This is really deep, hardwired into our reptile brains. Same with the hands. The hands tell us who someone is, how they're going to treat us. Do we have to fight? Do we have to run? Whatever. It's really, really deeply hardwired into our brains that these are very important areas, the face, the hands, and that's why they feel larger than they actually are. And part of this gap between what we feel and between what the actual measurements of things is the process. The problem is that you were so enthusiastic about something, or you had such a great idea. The idea was glowing in your mind, and then when it's out there, it's not glowing anymore. And this is part of problem number 3.
The Artist's Toolkit.
So we've had problem number 1. Number 1 is your idea is one thing and reality is another thing. And there's a long road between the two, and a lot of stuff happens to your idea on the way. Accept it. The second thing is the measurements of the thing are not the same as what we know or what we feel when we perceive a thing. Gap number 3 is having intense feelings while you work does not mean, unfortunately, that your work will make others feel intense feelings. Just because I have this intense moment in my studio or wherever, it doesn't necessarily mean that others can share this or that I am able to transmit this. There are so many, when you watch artists' movies, there's always this moment when the artist is completely in flow, uncontrollably splashing paint around, because normally painters, it's normally white men painters, splashing, no, not always, but splashing paint around and completely, in the grips of inspiration. And that is meant to explain why we get so excited about their work. Unfortunately, that is not an equation that works. Because, just because you're enthusiastic doesn't mean that whatever you're doing will be able to convey the same enthusiasm to someone else. I think that is one of our big tragedies. Feeling it is not enough. You need to shape it so that it can convey your enthusiasm. So the normal answer to the problem of the gap between what you feel when you make the work and what others feel when they see it, the answer usually is form. And this is, of course, one of the biggest and most work-intensive parts of working as an artist, to find a design, a shape, a form that works. And there are so many aspects of it. There are so many things that you can throw into the world and people can communicate with it or not. That's how visual art works. And it is all about finding a form that is visually and emotionally strong and fascinating. It's kind of easy to test. It's a question of, yes, maybe also of inspiration, but also of practice, exercise. A lot of it is about composition, it's about color, it's about atmosphere. It's about stuff that you practice, that you learn, that you find out. And a lot of it is not rushing around dripping paint or having inspired feelings. A lot of it is just work. And of course, it's always a good indication when you have something where you think, wow, I want to look at it all the time. It's so interesting. it's got something, I don't know what, but I just want to keep looking at it when you think that. And it's always good to make several versions of something and test it. What is stronger? What has a stronger pull? And yeah, of course, that is kind of a lifetime project. And it's also good for it to get feedback from a group. Test it out.
The Artist's Toolkit.
So these are the 3 gaps. Yeah, ideal and reality, inner and outer perception, and your feelings and the feeling of the others when they look at your work. So to sum it up, one of the most important aspects of what we mentioned today is finding a good form, finding a good, strong realization for your idea. That's what will make people respond to it. This is also why one of our most important tools is taking a step back, taking a break. Take some time to become more neutral, but also take time in which your unconscious can work. And because feeling inspired is not yet the same as inspiring others, you need to be aware of these testing tools. 3 main testing tools, for example, are, as I said again, take a break, come back, check. B, activate your peer group, test, discuss, get feedback. C, show your work, test, discuss, get feedback.
Exercise.
And this is also today's exercise. It's kind of different from other days and other episodes. Today's exercise for you is, and it may sound easier than it actually is, find your peer group. Or find someone who can give you good feedback. And remember that giving feedback is an art. So please, your job now is check in your mind, go through your list of friends and people you work with and family and so on, and find out, A, who do you feel at ease with? Someone who you trust. B, you need someone who is, remember, feedback is an art. You need somebody who can criticize your work in a way that you can handle, because you want to be encouraged, right? You do not. It's very easy to find discouragement, to get discouraged in this world. So what you want is somebody who can criticize you in a way that you can handle, that helps you. And remember that a lot of people, when you show them work that is only half done, a lot of people are not able to see what is in there, and that a lot of people cannot see what's going to come, and they will judge what they see as if it were a finished piece. Please be aware of that. This can be very discouraging, and try to protect yourself from that. Normally, as a rule, people who somehow have to do with making things will be aware of this. They will be aware of the difference between something that is not yet finished at its potential and a finished piece. And they will not talk about it as if it were finished. So they will not discourage you. And of course, it's always good to, if you have friends, if you have people you trust, or if you can make friends with the other people around you who work in a similar way, who are also trying to teach themselves art, or who are studying art, or who are interested in art in school or wherever you are. Yes, find these people and get together, and remember that they will also probably be grateful for constructive criticism and good feedback. So, doesn't sound like much, but actually it can be a piece of work. Please try to find a group of people who can help you in that way. People you can use as a test group, people you can run your work by, and who will give you honest, constructive feedback in a way that you can handle, even if it's not what you wanted. That's the exercise for today. And of course, I also have some reading recommendations. These are not really about all the theory that I mentioned, because there's a lot of psychological, zoologist, philosophical theory that you can read about this, but I thought that wasn't so interesting. So I'm recommending 2 works that are about experimenting, because experimenting is all about developing some ease with these gaps and accepting them. So 2 really nice works about experimenting. This is Dustin Roberts with a Y, Dustin Roberts, Making Things Move, DIY Mechanisms for Inventors, Hobbyists and Artists, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, 2011. And also very nice is Brady Wilkes, Alternative Photographic Processes, Crafting Handmade Image, London, 2015. Both are about experiments. Both are experiments that are kind of complicated, but both are really worth looking into. So yeah, have a look into these books and enjoy. Don't buy them, just try to check them out somewhere at the library or maybe at the bookstore or online, whatever, and then decide if you want to buy them. Enjoy.
The Artist's Toolkit. Conceptualized and presented by Kaethe Wenzel. Assistance, Nadia Driller. A project by European University Flensburg.